This is TWiT.
All right, late breaking news. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Senate panel has approved the antitrust bill. I can't remember which one. Oh, the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. It's headed to the Senate floor. This is one of a couple of bills that are making their way through the lawmakers' desks. And joining us today to talk about big tech and its conversation with lawmakers is Mark Gurman from Bloomberg. Hello, Mark. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Mikah. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to have you here today. So I imagine you just saw the news that that one bill is making its way to the Senate floor. But before we get into that, I was hoping that you could kind of give us a basic breakdown of what Apple and Google kind of went, oh, these bills are there. These are the ones we need to talk about. What are these bills? What do they actually involve? What are they trying to change about the way that these companies work?
So there's at least two bills in the works. One of them went to the Senate floor today for a process called markup, whereas senators will take a look at the bills, they'll have their discussions, and they'll decide if they want to push the bill forward. Obviously, we're a very long way for any type of bill coming into law. These bills would have to go through Congress. They would have to go to both sides, the Senate, the House, and there's a whole legal process through the U.S. government to get this bill to come to pass. And it seems, in my opinion right now, fairly unlikely that both sides of Congress, the House and the Senate, will come to some sort of agreement to get these bills passed. But what Apple and Google are saying is that these bills would hurt the fundamental aspects of the App Store related to privacy and security. On the iOS side, Apple is saying that these apps would allow for sideloading, that this bill would make it so that Apple would have to allow users to install applications on the iPhone and the iPad from outside of the App Store. Obviously, that would have two factors. The one factor that Apple is really pushing is its privacy standpoint, that this would break some of its privacy controls like app tracking transparency and the other mechanisms the App Store offers for privacy. The truth is that this bill, if it allows sideloading, would also fundamentally upend the business model for the App Store, which is their 15 to 30% commission. So it's a mix of both. Apple's pushing the privacy angle, but of course there's the monetary aspects too, all the money that could be lost from apps that are sideloaded or installed from other means other than the App Store.
Yeah. So, in fact, there was a great quote in the piece. After a tumultuous year that witnessed multiple controversies regarding social media, whistleblower allegations of long-ignored risks to children, and ransomware attacks that hobbled critical infrastructure, it would be ironic if Congress responds by making it much harder to protect the privacy and security of Americans' personal devices. This is my question, though. From your perspective as someone who's long been in the tech sector, do these bills in their current form make it harder to protect, and I quote here, make it harder to protect the privacy and security of personal devices? This is the argument, but I'm curious, kind of from your take, is that more of an argument for argument's sake, or can you kind of explain to our listeners how these bills' rulings could result in more difficulty protecting users' privacy? You did with the Apple's newest privacy protection. How does this work on the Google side? And kind of from the security standpoint, what are we looking at here? Because I know one of my brothers loves to jailbreak his device, and I stay very far away from that device. It's like, put that thing in a Faraday cage if you bring it around me. So I'm certainly concerned about sideloading. But why should users be concerned about sideloading or not?
I mean, from my perspective, I think Apple is a big enough technology company that has the resources to allow some sort of sideloading without fundamentally hurting the App Store ecosystem, without fundamentally hurting the privacy of their devices. One thing they could do is they could say, okay, you are allowed to sideload applications. Developers are allowed to sideload applications, install applications from the web, alternative app stores and stuff, but they have to use special frameworks that really work with our privacy controls. So I can see one solution here where they allow sideloading, they allow external app stores, they allow installations from the web, but they still have to follow many of the same App Store rules, particularly when it comes to privacy, right? Apple sometimes claims naivety, right, where they act naive, where they're not able to really accomplish these things, right? The truth of the matter is, I think Apple's privacy controls could be developed in a sense to really also protect the iPhone and the other devices, with sandboxing privacy controls, just like they do on the Mac, where they offer the alternative App Store option where you can install applications from the web from anywhere you'd like. That's why during the Epic Games trial, what they were trying to do is they were trying to say the Mac is filled with malware. and it's not a very private or secure platform, right? They were basically throwing the Mac under the bus to protect the iPhone ecosystem.
Wow. That's a very interesting point. Now, what do lawmakers say in response to this? And do you feel, does it pass the technology grade? Because you often hear, this is a common refrain, that our lawmakers, I mean, in some cases it is a concern that our lawmakers don't have the technology they need to make rules and regulations about this. What are lawmakers saying when Apple and Google in some cases say, hey, sideloading is going to be a problem? Do they have some sort of response and say, this is why we need to allow this to happen anyway?
I mean, some of the comments from lawmakers and other lawsuits and other, legal discussions about this come down to the Mac being a platform that's pretty open and also offered by Apple. It comes down to Android and other ecosystems that allow this as well. So they're basically saying that, Apple could put these privacy protections through sideloading, through non-App Store apps if they really wanted to. And I think lawmakers understand that in addition to trying to protect its ecosystem, it's also trying to protect its bottom line.
Understood. Now, I thought this was an interesting thing. In the piece, you talk about Apple sending a letter to lawmakers and sort of outlining its concerns with, the certain diction that they used. Google, on the other hand, published a blog post. Now, of course, there are going to be conversations that aren't necessarily taking place in public, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on these two kind of varying techniques for trying to get across a point. Why would Google publish a blog post? Is that actually aimed at lawmakers? Is it aimed at the public more? Apple sending a letter directly to lawmakers? One, I can't remember which lawmaker it was, but they said that they had been on the phone with Tim Cook earlier that day. Yeah, Ted Cruz. Yeah,
Ted
exactly.
Cruz, I would guess he spoke to Klobuchar as well and a few other senators, Mike Lee. So David Cicilline potentially too.
These techniques, what are your kind of thoughts about who these are aimed at and how well they end up shaping things? Is it more about the money in the end, or can these things kind of be swayed either via public opinion or by communicating with the legislators?
I think it's a mix. I mean, I think you really need to get public opinion in there. You need to get opinion from third-party developers that exist today. You need to get opinion from people who contribute to the ecosystem. You need to hear opinions of the companies. You need to hear opinions of the users. And I think both companies are actually just doing that, right? Apple didn't post a letter on their website because they don't want a public spat with, Congress on apple.com, but they clearly have been communicating with them. They have developers, testifying for them at different trials and stuff. They're probably putting the senators and stuff in touch with different developers and other people who work in the ecosystem, different consumers using data to show the benefits. So I think both companies are essentially doing the same thing. It's just on the surface, it looks quite a little bit different. And this is, one of the unique situations where both Apple and Google are on the same team here, right? None of them want to have legislation backing their app stores and really controlling their ecosystems, right? They want to be completely free to operate their businesses how they so choose. And I truly think that's why these bills are not going to end up being enacted into law, right? Because you have Democrats on one side, you have Republicans on the other side. And obviously on the Republican side, there's different beliefs about how businesses should be run. They typically lean on the side of let the business owner run the business the way they would like to run it. And so maybe because of that, just the nature of the Republican Party, right? Maybe that will, prevent the bill from being enacted into law. But obviously the Democrat side and those working on the bills themselves do make very good points. I personally think there could be a system where Apple does allow sideloading and app installations from outside the App Store while keeping the app sandbox and keeping them safe and keeping users private.
Now, one of the things that may surprise people when they first hear this is that there are quite a few small tech companies that are on board with these acts. And then once you kind of learn a little bit more about why, it makes a bit more sense. But I was hoping that you could explain why there are some small tech companies who are for these bills and what they hope to gain out of these being enacted.
I mean, at a fundamental level, Apple takes a 15 to 30% cut. So if you're an app developer and you have the means to really support these bills and try to push these bills forward through Congress and the House and the Senate, I think that from a business standpoint, that's a smart thing to do, right? You wouldn't have to really abide by all the App Store review guidelines. You may be able to circumvent Apple's charges, and business is business. They want to save that 15% to 30%, right? If you're an app developer and you make $1 million a year, right? 30%, that means you're left with, $300,000 less before taxes. So obviously, from a financial standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for them to want to push these bills forward and do anything they can to sort of break away from the Apple commission structure.
Do we think we'll hear anything from the other kind of big companies, Amazon and Meta, aka Facebook, or is this primarily, hey, this is Apple and Google's problem? I guess Microsoft could even be thrown in there a little bit. Will we hear more from those companies, do you think, as these make their way through? Or, as you pointed out, the likelihood of these actually being enacted is perhaps low enough that these companies don't really need to throw down their gauntlets?
I'd be very surprised if these laws were passed, but at the same time, I think Apple and Google have a real stronghold, a real true duopoly on the App Store market, and the impact on Microsoft and some of the other developers, Facebook, would be very slim. Meta / Facebook, whatever you want to call it, has taken the anti-Apple and Google approach to the App Store. So, there could be a world where Facebook is sort of supporting the bills and say, hey, we'll work with Congress to, adjust our guidelines to fit this bill and really go against the grain against Apple and Google on this one.
Interesting. Mark Gurman, I want to thank you so much for taking some time today to chat with me. Fantastic conversation. If folks want to follow you online and check out your highly quoted newsletter, where should they go to do so?
That's funny. Thank you. I'm at twitter.com/Mark Gurman, MarkGurman. As you can see there, and you can follow my newsletter, Power On, by going to Bloomberg.com, go into newsletters, you can Power On and subscribe, or it's in the URL on my Twitter account as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you. See you next time.